This next 5-year window is when you don't go practical and safe. This is not the time to get the job mom wanted you to. This is the time to realize that you have a 5-year window, and it's 3 for some, it's 8 for others, but this is a 5-year window for you to attack the life that you want to win and go and travel and learn. Go and start that business that you've always wanted. Hook up with those 3 teammates and start that band you've always wanted. This is the time to be massively risk.
So I'm here with Agnes. So Agnes, could you please introduce you maybe in 20 seconds?
So I am Agnes Hugot. I'm a French citizen. I came to Singapore about 2 years and a half ago, and I started my own fintech adventure.
What do you do exactly?
We are building a digital platform based on distributed ledger, and we want to fill the whole of the supply chain and the trade finance. We want to automatize the supply chain in order to allow for SMEs to trade safely in an automated way.
Okay, all around the world?
It could be anywhere.
Okay.
What you need is an access, so essentially your mobile or your computer get authenticated by the system, and then you can trade with someone which is at the other side of the world. Doesn't matter where you are. The only thing is you need to be properly authenticated.
Great. So the main purpose of this interview is your testimonial about the subprime crisis, because you were deeply involved on it. So could you please tell us more how it was? And
Sure. So for me, the crisis started in October 2008, just 2 weeks after Lehman Brothers.
Okay.
But effectively, the Lehman collapse, I was not in London at that time. I was diving in the Maldives. So I guess when I came back, I had a bit of a shock because I was reading the newspapers in the flight. I was going back to Spain at that time. I was working for an Icelandic bank.
Okay.
And I was heading the Spanish branch. And when I took my flight, I was like, there is something wrong. There is something wrong. So essentially, we last just 2 more weeks after Lehman Brothers. Then it was the turn of the Icelandic banks.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, just imagine you're working normally. I was doing a restructuring for big Spanish corporates. I was leading a banking pool, almost 6 or 7 banks.
Okay.
And also, all of a sudden, you get a call from your London headquarters, basically saying, just stop, we are bust. So you're like, what do you mean we are bust? I am in the middle of a restructuring. I can't let them down, right? So I was supposed to present in the afternoon in front of the management, the banking pool, and the investors, a few things, very nasty things, and I was told to drop everything. So then it was just like the shopkeeper. So I got a few phone calls from my colleagues, basically all in tears. 3 out of 4 were putting their house for sale. Okay. So usually it starts like this, you have a big commotion, the corporate is bust. You don't really understand what that means for a bank, because essentially it's not because you have some issues that your borrowers are not going to repay you, because they are supposed to pay interest every month, right? So cash-wise, you still get cash. But you are preempted from operating. And essentially in London, there was a freezing order. All the assets of all the Icelandic banks were frozen by the English government. So we could not have access to the office. We could not even use our credit card, corporate credit cards. We could not even use the taxi phone number. It was not working anymore for us. So all of a sudden, you start to realize that you're left behind without any proper instructions.
Okay.
So I had to leave my flat. I had to go and buy another suitcase. I wasn't sure I could come back. So effectively, what you do is just like, it's the last day, you have to go back to London.
Okay.
You need to take all your files with you.
Okay.
And you're saying goodbye to everyone, saying, no worries, I will be back.
Okay.
But deep inside, you just don't know whether they will authorize you to be back.
Okay.
So we had a big subsidiary in Spain, and they were also very concerned about what was going on because they were essentially, behind the parent company. So that's the things that I remember. The second step was I was back. I came back. Managed to come back about a week later. And
so you went back in London?
I went back to London.
Okay.
We had a chat with our colleagues because we didn't know what was going on.
Okay.
We didn't know what the Icelandics had done. We didn't know why the regulator was after us.
Okay.
So it was a big crisis. I went to talk to an international law firm specialized in litigation because we didn't know how much time would be just wiped out.
Okay.
And in the London headquarters were almost 300 people.
Okay.
So about 80 people with the corporate banking, let's say 50 people with commercial banking, and the rest was just like M&A.
Okay.
So service,
Okay.
broker.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, they were gone in a month. Gone. So a company which had been
Because no
going
more,
on,
no more
more
work.
cash.
Okay. No more cash.
no
yeah.
more projects.
Okay.
Nobody wanted to pay anymore. Gone.
Okay.
This company was maybe 120 years old. It was gone with the wind. The banking side was more complicated because we had a nice portfolio of loans.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they were paying interest. At some point, they didn't want to pay anymore, but we were chasing them. And we had to put a business plan together to see whether we should sell, fire sale the assets, or whether we should keep going and make the most of the value, because at that time everything was trading at 50% of value. It was a massive panic.
Wow.
All around Europe, it was a massive panic for banks' assets. Everyone wanted to do the same thing, sell down their portfolios.
I couldn't imagine. How was it?
So essentially, a month after that, because they don't want to keep you to pay you to pretty much nothing, they kicked out half of the branch.
But you stayed?
No, I had to go.
Okay.
I had to go, and effectively I created my own venture.
Okay.
So that was my second entrepreneurship.
Okay.
At that time I could see that there was a huge opportunity because banks' assets were trading at 50% value,
Okay.
but the borrowers, the companies, were doing perfectly well. So I launched my private debt venture, which was backed by two private equity firms.
Okay.
We are based in Paris. I was backed by 123 Venture, and interestingly,
I know 123. Yeah.
the founder of 123 Venture is now the founder of Lendix, which is a crowdfunding platform.
I know.
And the other founder was running a family office at that time called Capzamin, and now it's one of the major mezzanine providers in France. They are running about 600 million euros of fund.
Right.
So we are backed by these guys, but at that time, you will not find any institutions happy to put a single euro in your fund. Everyone was closed for business.
But you found.
But these guys were private.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was more like private funds and private equity guys who understood the situation and the opportunity. So private market was brand new at that time, created by Christine Lagarde in July 2008. So effectively, you could lend outside of a bank. So we started to file the documents required to get a visa from the French authorities. So we recreated a bank outside of a bank system. They didn't really know pretty well what it was about. The tax regime was still not decided.
Okay.
So there were a lot of things which were missing, but we made it through. We were given the first visa to operate.
Okay.
It was in July 2009. And we were supposed to invest also in debt equity swaps, so for SMEs. So situations where you have a financial imbalance and the financial structure doesn't work, but the company is still generating cash flows, positive cash flows. So after that, I had another experience about going through the crisis for every single country in Europe because I was recruited by the team which was leading the spin-off of Lehman Brothers.
Okay.
There were about 20 people based in London.
Okay.
And my first mandate was to go to see what was going on in Greece. I had no clue what it was going on. But essentially we knew that the French banks were still were not in a good shape over there. So I had to go there with my business card, knock at the door, starting market chats with bankers, trying to understand what was going on.
How was it?
Well, it was a precarious equilibrium. Everyone was pretending that it was going fine.
Really?
But 6 months later, it was a deeper political crisis. Then, in order to get some financing from IMF and ECB, they were obliged to run a national stress test. So I was in charge of pitching for this exercise. I was not really happy about it because I could see that the stress test had destroyed the entire Irish banking system a year ago. So we were not given the job, but essentially we started to work for the number one bank. So we became the advisors to the CEOs and to the key directors of the bank.
Really interesting, right?
Very interesting to see where they were and also the situation, because there were 18 banks in Greece, so the Greek market was overbanked, just like in every country in Europe. So definitely after having the stress test, they would not keep 18 banks, they would just merge them.
Okay.
So I had to face...
How many did they keep at the end?
Oh, they kept 5, 6.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And essentially the French banks were merged,
Okay.
they were acquired at a negative price, but they were merged into the other existing banks.
Okay.
And the smaller banks, they were just merged. I mean, there was no official process to sell. Effectively, it was just like defaulting portfolios to manage. But it was very weird because the journey was not easy. Essentially, some people were not convinced to even play the game with the stress test. So we had to tell them that they would want to become the number one bank in terms of quality of process and quality of portfolios, so that they would then manage the consolidation of the banking industry. So they would merge the banks around them. So we worked a lot with them, and I could see, the inadequacy of the IT systems for banks. It was amazing. I could see, the letter of credits that were just given to borrowers, but they had no clue how to manage them, how to sort them, whether they would be called upon by the counterparty of the borrowers. It was a big mess. But essentially, we finished number one bank. So there was a big difference. There was a big difference between us and the number two in terms of provisions. So in terms of percentage, we were maybe 3-4% better, which means out of 50 billion portfolio, we didn't have to book about 2 billion of euros of provision, and the others had. So of course, the banks needed some big refinancing from ECB, and they kept going. So the time was very bad because I could see also the lack of financing available to the private economy. The Greek state was not functioning at all. They were not paying back the VAT. Not even the social, the healthcare system was working. So just imagine you have working credit of a year and a half, 2 years, and everyone in the supply chain does not pay everyone, so everyone stays together. But you can have 1 year and a half, 2 years of invoices due. So that was the situation at that time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
A year and a half okay. It's unbelievable.
It was amazing, yeah. And they kept sending money to the Greek state, which was just pulling out the money to their, to their staff, to their pensionees. But no money was recirculated to the private economy. So we suggested to create a financing agency dedicated to maintain, support the SMEs and the private corporates. We are not really followed, but every 6 months you could see the number of companies bankrupt increasing, and the lack of cash in the system.
And what is the genesis of this crisis?
I guess in Greece it's a bit different than in the other countries. The state was completely out of control.
Okay.
And many aspects were not controlled. First of all, the tax situation of taxpayers, the register of assets, and at some point, the debt was growing because the economy was financed by debt, but there was no value creation behind that. So a little bit like there was an imbalance between the amount of financing that the economy needed, the real situation in terms of losses of these guys, and the type of financing which was debt. So on the state side, and then of course that converged into the bank side, because most of the Greek state corporates, they were losing a lot of money.
Okay.
And they were kept under the financing of the Greek state, or they were lent money by the Greek banks because they were the biggest corporates in Greece. So at some point you could see that there is a halt to what debt or financing by debt can bring to a country, and essentially also I think there was a lot of tax evasion.
And what about Goldman Sachs in this story?
I don't want to blame them, but I guess the original situation of Greece was a bit misunderstood.
Okay.
When they joined the European community. But I would say you cannot prevent Greece from being part of Europe, because to me Athens is really the hometown of Europe and of the democratism.
Sure.
So in order to accept the country, they didn't really pay attention to the right financial indicators, and then that kept being devastating. But I would say that it was not the first time that Greece was bankrupt. If you look backwards, Greece has been bankrupt maybe almost every 10 years. So,
really?
So it's not only Goldman Sachs, I guess.
Okay.
We don't want to learn our mistakes.
Thank you so much for this testimonial, Agnes. And I have a few more questions for you. I think you read a lot.
Yes, I do.
What is your most inspirational founder? And also, I will have another question about some books. But what is the most inspirational founder?
Founder of a company.
Of company, yeah.
Of
sure.
a company. So now that before I used to look at the US, of course, because we have always been attracted by American founders.
Okay.
But since I came to Singapore, I started to read about the region, and I started to read about the developments in certain countries, like in China. Mm-hmm. And I must say that I have a lot of admiration for Alibaba, the company that was created by Jack Ma. I think these guys have come a long way to show us a big example of how to run an e-trade system. I'm very fascinated by what you can do on Alibaba, and to me that can be the model for the next generation of e-commerce platforms, because everything is integrated. So let's aside the technology, because you, as a consumer, you just use it, right? But if you think about it, you can be authenticated, you can place a purchase order, you can source factories which are at the other side of the world. Mm-hmm. You can make the payments, and you don't leave the platform. You're still on the same platform. This is incredible. And now you can find the financing, and you can find insurance products. This guy has reinvented, and I would say, an e-village, where in France we are very proud of our tiny villages where you can go there, buy your bread, you can go to the library, you buy books, and then you have always 2 or 3 bank branches. You may have 1 insurance company branch, and you find all of that, physically speaking, in the next 200 square meters. Here with Alibaba, you can find the same thing, just on virtual journey. And I think this is remarkable, because this is the best way to reach out to the emerging markets, and they are going to be massively attacking the emerging markets.
You're the first people who said me, Jack Ma is my best founder and he's the best founder and my inspirational founder.
I just don't know about his situation when he started this business. I must imagine what China was at that time, oscillating between a centralized economy with a lot of constraints and this aspiration for freedom and for consuming. I guess this guy has started a business of that size in a country where it's not like in the US, where you have freedom of entrepreneurship. You can find financing, you can explain your business ideas, and people would buy in and provide you with the financing. This guy has started a fantastic platform in a country where everything was closed around.
Yes.
And I think they had to recompose the framework for having a real business logic.
But this guy is a hustler, really. Because I heard some different stuffs about this guy. He failed 10 times in Harvard because he sent an application to Harvard and no, they didn't want to him. And also he was an English teacher. When Burger King arrived in China, he was the only guy who was rejected from Burger King, and he tried many things, and Alibaba worked.
And that worked. But that reminds me of 2000, the internet time, because in 2000 you had a lot of young guys doing their MBAs in Harvard, and after their summer break, they would not go back to Harvard because they were made an offer by a startup, and they were just thinking, this is the chance of my life. Why do I want to get a diploma? I just stay there. So effectively, I don't think getting the best diploma is really indicative of your journey as an entrepreneur.
No,
that's for sure. Right. But that's really funny that it created such an empire in a very closed. To me, it was the closest economy ever. So yes, we are learning a lot from what he's doing, and now he even tries to push the financing, so that the companies that buy and sell on the platform can buy and sell more using this working capital line. So to me it's the best e-commerce platform you can find with this integration of all the functions.
I think you're true. I think you're totally true. I should buy some stocks from Alibaba.
So now the quality of the products, I have some discussions about them because my Chinese teachers usually tell me.
You took some Chinese lessons?
Yeah, and they're based in Wuhan.
Okay.
So they agree with me. Alibaba's products, like sometimes quality, and you don't get what you buy, really.
Okay.
So I think per se there is not the international standard of trade that you should expect. Okay. Which leaves to other people the capacity to come up with an alternative.
Okay, interesting, really interesting. And what about the most impactful book you read before?
Recently, I think when I came to Asia, I thought I had to learn. And I went to the SEA.The library, and I was just trying to see what they were teaching to their students, what they were giving them to read. Because I think reading really changed according to the times. You are in school, and essentially talking about disruption or talking about Asia was really what I wanted to read. So I picked up two books. One was about emotional intelligence, how to resist in a corporate by making sure that your emotional intelligence plays in your favor. But the one book that I really liked, and which was a really big book, it was On China by Kissinger.
Okay.
And the book depicts all the history and the behavior of the Chinese political guys but also in light with their relationship with the US, which was fascinating because there's always been kind of a dance. I like you, I don't like you, and I don't know you.
Catch me if you can.
Catch me if you can. But that was very interesting to understand the developments of the relationship between the two countries, and also the big change in the Chinese economy, because these guys made huge improvements to bring people out of the poverty level. So yeah, I spent quite a couple of months, I think, reading this book. Yeah, it's a huge book, like this. Huge book. But at least, I got some good feeling about what China was about, and the role also in the region, the role in the Chinese Sea and so on. Because when you read what's going on in newspapers, it's not really clear what the situation comes from, right?
Maybe it's false.
Maybe it's wrong, completely. Yeah, you're right. Depending on where you are, you're going to have one side of the story only. So yeah, recently this book that I really brought me a lot of ideas, and also meaning about how the region can develop going forward.
Okay. I should have a look on this book, definitely.
I can lend it to you.
Okay, thank you.
It's a big one.
And last question, what is the advice that you give to a millennial who wants to build his own business?
Right after school?
Yeah, right after school.
I think I would just tell him to do it if he's really keen on doing it.
Okay.
Not to hesitate between a high-paid job and, but then to learn from every moment. It could be, because he would succeed, but most of the time he would not, due to the statistics. But from the failures, he will learn so much. Then he may be ready to join a bigger corporate and bring more value than if he had just followed a normal path. I think I started 3 companies a bit too late, after the age of 30. But my view is more. If you don't feel like following the process of your big corporate, if you want to be happy, if you want to be happy in what you do, just try a bit what it is to work as an entrepreneur in a small team. Doesn't mean that you want to be alone. I would not recommend to start alone. I would say just be as a team and learn, because this is real life. And then you will see whether you like this for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Some people start like this and they spend their whole career. And some pretty good companies can emerge from that. So I would say just do it. But then, if at some point you don't believe this is the scheme you want to be in for the rest of your life, bring back what you've learned to a corporate.
Okay. But do it.
But do it. Just do it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Agnes.
You're welcome.
For this,
You're welcome,
testimony. Thank you.
Boy, if you're lucky enough to be graduating today with not a fucking idea of what you're going to do with your future, nobody's ever been luckier than you. Please recognize it.